Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am happy to be here with you today. And if this is the first time that you are joining us for the live stream, we do long-form political commentary. Every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we join with you to talk with you about the issues that affect you every day. We invite you to join us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, and all social media, and also to be able to call into the program at 607-242-1582 to add your voice to the conversation, because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in hearing your voice from anywhere in the world to talk about the issues that are affecting all of us. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of things that I think are rather important. Talking about what's happening with Dr. Fauci and the revelation of how America has been misled. The world has been misled. Talking about what's going on in the international politics and the local politics, some of the developments that are happening out there, as well as, a couple of really big issues. Now, most people who may know the program know I, like most people, are a very private person. And I don't really talk about my personal life very much, but I believe it's important because there is a mental health issue that I want to talk to you about. And it's affecting millions, literally millions of Americans every day. If you may have noticed, when you see the show start up, the first thing we have is a suicide hotline and a domestic abuse hotline. And we have them there, and we've had them there since February of 2020, because we've seen one of the consequences of the COVID-19 crisis has been the impact to individuals, about their mental health, about their ability to live their lives. It's been a big deal, and it's been affecting a lot of people. And even as we are now getting rid of the masks, as we're trying to attempt to get back to life, we're trying to get back to work, a lot of people are still being affected, a lot. There are a lot of people who have, even now, are still being negatively impacted by this. And I have to admit, I happen to be one of them. So let's be honest. What you're going to see is, recently, we had taken a test. It's a mental health test about depression. And it would seem that we have been affected by depression. A lot of people have. And like we said before, it's not just one or two people. There are millions of people who have been affected by the pressures from COVID-19, businesses shutting down, losing their jobs, getting sick, the threat of being sick, the pressure of whether you do or do not get vaccinated, watching what's happening with our economy as inflation is flying up, the fighting and increased violence in the Middle East, watching the genocide of the Uyghurs in China, the constant insults against blacks and Hispanics coming from Joe Biden, the abuses in our southern border. These are all things that are affecting us all. And it weighs on us. And I have to tell you, it weighs on us here at No Soundbites Allowed. 15 years of talking about some of the biggest problems that are affecting America, affecting our politics, affecting our lives every day. It weighs on you. And we don't take a lot of vacations. And a lot of people haven't. And with what's been happening in the last year, it's been a lot of pressure, a lot of problems that have been adding up over and over again. And we didn't notice the signs at first, the things that, the lack of sleep, the change in our diet, the isolation from everyone else around us, things like not being happy, being alone and feeling alone. These are all things that can be signs of a depression. And most recently, we've had massive bouts of insomnia. And because of that, that kind of all added up, and we started feeling pretty dark. and pretty bad. And so we decided, let's go and reach out. Let's see, is this a problem? Is this just something temporary? And when we went through the test, we found out, according to that rating, we've taken a couple of tests and double checked, moderate depression. It's a big deal. And it's been affecting a lot of people, not just us. Not just us. Because you can see, and one of the things we want to show you here is it's been affecting a lot of people. The suicide numbers in 2020, 10th leading cause of death in the United States in 2020 was suicide. There are 48,000 Americans that died by suicide, not even counting those who attempted to commit suicide as well. And that is a huge number. It's the second leading cause of death for those between the ages of 10 and 34. Fourth leading cause of death for those from 35 to 54, which I happen to be in that age group. It's a big deal. A lot of people are being affected by this. And we've seen back in September of 2020, depression had tripled. The numbers of depression, people suffering from depression in America, tripled. That's a huge number. We see most recently in Forbes. This is from April. 63 of young people in America are suffering from symptoms of anxiety and depression. A quarter of the people that they had did a study on, they found that they had increased their their substance abuses, alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs. We've seen all-time records of use of heroin and overdoses that have been affecting people. We've seen that, according to the New York Times, also from April, that researchers have seen that they're on racial trends. While suicides dropped in 2020 by a little bit, the number of people who are Black and Hispanic, who are normally one of the groups least likely to commit suicide, have actually risen dramatically. And we know that most recently, on May 10th, 51% of young Americans were saying that they were down, depressed, and feeling hopeless. This is huge. These are huge numbers. A startling young people have reported a range of serious mental health symptoms, according to a Harvard study. 68% have said they have very little energy. 59% are saying that they're having trouble sleeping. 52% have found little pleasure in being able to do anything. 49% have a bad appetite or are either overeating. 48% are having trouble concentrating. 32% are slow moving and fidgeting. 28% have had thoughts of self-harm. 35% of Blacks and 31% of Hispanics have been reporting these kind of cases, these symptoms. It's a big deal. And it doesn't just affect young people. It doesn't affect just poor people or people of different types. It affects everyone. It's affecting me. Okay, and I want to be... Hello, Dal. It's good to see you here. So we're starting off this episode, and again, I'm telling you something about what's happening with me personally, but I am just one example. I'm a 53-year-old Black Hispanic, and yes, I am suffering from, it seems to be suffering from depression to a moderate degree. And, I had to go out and I had to say, hey, let me reach out. Because I know we're celebrating D-Day today, as Dal mentioned. And I'm going to be talking about that in a moment. And we're looking at the troubling time in the world. And a lot of people are anxious. There's so much going on. But we have to look out for our health. And we have to reach out to our friends and say, hey, I'm not doing well. Something isn't right. I'm feeling bad. I'm not in 100%. And that's what I did, to be honest. I reached out and said, hey, I had to reach out to friends and say, I'm not feeling well. I'm not doing well. That doesn't mean that I'm suddenly insane And there's too many people who have a stigma with that and don't want to reach out. And these things get progressively worse. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly I'm suffering from moderate depression. No, it's something that's been creeping up. It's something that's a symptom of all the pressures that we've all been going through. And I think many people have varying degrees of this. At any age group, we have to reach out. And that's why, again, I want to mention to you, and why we do on this program, we put it up there. First thing, suicide hotline, domestic abuse hotline. If you're suffering from domestic abuse, which is on a rise, if you're suffering from suicide, which many blacks, Hispanics, Asians are suffering from, then please reach out, make the call your friends, let them know how you are feeling, and say, you know what, I'm not feeling well. I need to get outside. I need to get around people. I need to talk to someone. Do that, please, because we want you as part of our audience, no matter where you are in the world, because everyone around the world is suffering this. I want you to reach out, talk to someone, and say, hey, I need help. It's not a bad thing. It's not a negative. It's not something that you did wrong. It's just life, and it happens to us. And the sooner that we reach out to our friends, the sooner that we reach out to people who can help us, the sooner that we will feel better. Your appetite will come back. You will be able to sleep. You'll be able to enjoy your life again. And if we can say anything on this program, we want to say this, because we want you to be okay. Just like we are reaching out and saying to our friends, help. We want you to do the same, because you're not alone. You're not the only one feeling like this, but it doesn't have to be that way. The comments mentioned, Vic mentioned that free, that's what you're getting, get a job and buy. I'm not sure what you mean, Vic. Dal mentions, I think the condition is worse because of the fear mode that the legacy media has been pushing for so long, and there is a constant sense of fight or flight, and that's part of it. We've all been suffering under that. I mean, we were isolated from everyone. We've been in the lockdowns. Many people, like myself, were working at a job, and that business closed forever. We have many people who are facing businesses that may close in the next month or two forever. We have a lot of people who are unemployed at this time, who are facing bills. 12 million people are facing eviction. I get it. There are a lot of problems. And yeah, the media with its constant doom and gloom, you're going to die, it's affecting everyone. Everyone's going to get this COVID and everyone's going to die. That's the message we've been hearing for a year and continue to hear. I get it. I do. And I know how it feels. And watching the horrible news we see in our politics doesn't help. But that's why we're taking some time today to tell you, just like you, we feel the pressure too. That's the reason why. Reach out to your friends. Use the social media to say, hey, how are you feeling? And if someone says, I'm feeling down, get outside, talk to them, enjoy the weather if we can, and say, just talk to me. Just have a conversation. You will feel better, and it will improve. It's a process, but you can do it. So we wanted to talk about that, and we wanted to address that first before we got to anything else. And I hope people will appreciate that and be able to use that to improve their lives, because that's what this program's about. It's about having the conversation and trying to improve all of our lives. But there's a lot more to be talking about as well. And by the way, we do want to also mention that there was also this June 3rd, and this is something, again, news stations all around. We've been talking about since February of 2020. Psychologists are out there. News stations like CBS Fox 59, WVNS TV have mentioned, and this is in West Virginia, they're talking about this, that people are having increased fatigue, loss of energy, loss of interest of doing something that they once enjoyed, or having, or even being able to have sleep. And They're telling you, don't be afraid to reach out to family and friends and your loved ones. Don't be afraid to tell them you're not feeling right and that you're having some of these symptoms. And that's the first part of getting help. So it's something that a lot in the news media are noticing. I don't want you to feel like you're alone. Dow mentions having the ability and purpose to do something or enjoy something outside of work and current society helps. Gardening, home projects, inventing, all help. Playing video games, going out and just being around people, walking around your neighborhood, walking to the park, enjoying the sunshine. These are all great things. Exercising, all of it can help. So I did want to mention that because it's something that, I'm suffering from at the moment as well. It's something that we didn't realize. It crept up on us. And you know what? It's embarrassing to talk about it, but at the same time, we want you to know about it. But let's talk about what else is going on in our nation, the problems that we're having, because as Dal had mentioned, it's D-Day. And, it's a big deal. It's in 1942. We know, in D-Day, 1944, millions of Americans and so many people around the world were suffering from the World War II, the violence that we saw, and it engulfed the world. And we had millions go out. We saved France. We saved England. We saved the world. America got involved and said, we have to make this world better. In fact, if you were one of the veterans, one of the individuals going out and volunteering for World War II, 16 million Americans joined the armed services. Mind you, there weren't 350 million Americans. There were barely 100 million Americans at that time. So many fewer people, such a high percentage of this nation. And over 16 million Americans decided to join the military, to go and fight for World War II. Some people were as young as 15, some were as old as 72. And the average person was a 26-year-old white male with 9 years, a ninth grade education. And these individuals were drafted into the Army and became a rifleman. They had a wife and a child at home when they went off to war. The average guy was about 5'8", weighed 144 pounds, and went into basic training to learn how to become a soldier, gaining an average up to about 20 pounds, running around with packs that weighed 64 extra pounds. And they went out and they fought. They fought for all of us. And they saved the world, which is an important thing. As Dow mentions, D-Day, the D-Day presentation on the rail trail in our local area is over by the Coal House between 4 and 6 p.m. in Vestal, and I hope many people take an opportunity to see that. And I think it's important that we remember D-Day. And let's remember that we were fighting for our freedoms everywhere in the world, in France, in England, in Germany, throughout the world. The Pacific Theater as well came afterwards, but we were fighting for the freedoms that we have right now. And we have to ask each other, what's going on with those freedoms? What are we actually seeing right now? How are they being used? Well, let's take a look. Because what we're seeing is that in George Floyd Square, an autonomous zone, we saw that it was shut down. The city came in, tore down the autonomous zone. And as we have said on this program, as we have said many times on this program, autonomous zones are one of the worst things we could possibly see. They violate local, state, and federal laws. They are zones of tyranny being controlled by mobs from Antifa and the far left. And they are, well, what's that word that everyone has been saying about January 6th? That they were attempts to take over the government, that they're violations of our life and livelihood, that they're tyrannical. that they are insurrections. Well, that is the definition of every single autonomous zone. And I can tell you, the D-Day, the men and women who went to fight World War II weren't planning to do that so that we could see our cities being captured by these autonomous zones in Austin, in Minneapolis, in Portland, in Seattle, attempted in New York City, and other parts of the country. That was not what they were fighting for. Dow mentions his grandfather was with the 1st Artillery 3rd Army and landed on Normandy D-Day +1, telling his story to kids today, to his kids. And I think it's a wonderful story. And I think we have to look at this and say, what's going on in our nation when we have Antifa and BLM and all the far left organizations that are going out there and that they are taking over our cities? As reported here by Bloomberg News, the city of Minneapolis dismantled the barriers set up at George Floyd Square. They got rid of the autonomous zone after a year of this autonomous zone existing, of this insurrection in America, this violation of every single law in America. They got rid of it, finally. And right after they did it, the activists went back in and put back up the barricades. And this isn't because it's a white thing or a black thing. In fact, the question of reopening George Floyd Square divided the neighborhood of Minneapolis. The city conducted a poll of 929 people out of 30,000 residents that live within 1 mile of George Floyd Square. And they found that 65% of the people wanted to get rid of the autonomous zone. Some business owners have been complaining that they had reduced their foot traffic and there was an increase in the amount of crime in that area. Something we have heard about every autonomous zone in America, every single one of them. None of them have provided a benefit to the communities where they are found in. All you get is more violence, more crime, less businesses, less jobs. You have more people going into poverty because of these autonomous zones, more violence against men and women and against kids, more buildings and arsons. There is no positive. This is not what D-Day was about. This isn't what we should have seen. And on Thursday, we saw that the city, listening to its constituents, listening to the people right there at George Floyd Square, they got rid of it. And then a bunch of activists decided, nope, we're going to go and take it over again. We're going to violate those laws. And Dal, I agree. Your grandpa would be livid. I think anyone who served in World War II would be livid that all of a sudden they see their city, they see their homes, their country being divided based on race, based on the political agenda of a fringe group of radical democratic socialists or communists who want to end America as it exists. They want to take away your freedoms. They want to get rid of the Constitution. They want to get rid of your rights. That is you don't have to believe me. Go online, look up the charter of Black Lives Matters. Look at everything that is being said by Antifa. They tell you directly, they want to take away your rights. They want to take away the Constitution. They want to take away your freedom because they're smarter than you, because they know what they want, because what they want is more important than what you want. That's why they have that message, no justice, no peace. Because if you don't do what they say, they are going to terrorize you. And they use terroristic tactics because it is a terror tactic to hold hostage areas and communities in America and violate every law and violate and insult the sacrifices of the men and women in World War II that gave us the freedom we have today, the ability to be able to be online and to have a conversation. And I think it's insulting. It's terrifying. It's one of the worst things we can see. And you think, Mike, well, you're kind of overstating it a bit. Well, am I? Here it is. This is Kate, I don't know her last name. She's running for the Minneapolis mayor. And she is as she likes to put it, a sustainability scientist, which means absolutely nothing. It's a made-up term. It's not real. She's a transformation scholar. Again, it's a made-up term. There's nothing real. But it sounds like it's something important. It sounds like she has some serious degree to try and give her credibility. For what does she want to do? She wants to put the George Floyd tyranny, the George Floyd insurrection of the autonomous zone, she wants to put it back. To quote her, the decision to move or reopen George Floyd Square without community agreement, even though the city got that agreement, she says without community agreement, consensus, notice, or transparency, is a further injustice to a community calling for transformative change. Are you kidding me? That is such a lie. Because the city, as we reported back in March, there was already a discussion about getting rid of this autonomous zone, about reintroducing law and order, reintroducing the Constitution, and stopping the hostage, releasing the hostages of BLM and Antifa in Minneapolis. That conversation was being had in March. And when the city was asking the people, they said 65%, I want to be free. I want to be an American citizen, not a hostage of Antifa, not a hostage of an autonomous zone. Where we saw people died, where we saw on national TV a drive-by shooting just a week ago? A drive-by shooting on live TV at George Floyd Square, the autonomous zone. Why? Because autonomous zones are violent, because they are tyrannical. They are ruled by force, by mobs, and they do not abide by any laws and any justice because they're wrong. And that's not what D-Day is about. That's not what the World War II is about. It was actually the exact opposite. Dow mentions that the title sounds like UN language in line with 2030 policy based on the former Agenda 21. Very likely, but it's terrifying that we have individuals who are trying to run for elected office, like this Kate, who is running for elected office to run for mayor, and her idea of being a good candidate is let's get rid of the laws, let's let mobs rule, and let's allow people to die in these autonomous zones because police won't be able to save people's lives, as has happened already, and that we will, and she wants to allow drive-bys to exist in the heart of a city and possibly throughout the entire city. That's not what America is about. Now, you can tell me, Mike, I completely disagree. And you can tell me that you think the autonomous zones are fantastic. You can tell me that you think that it was the best thing to happen to America to see throughout our entire country riots and arsons and murders and violence like David Dorn, Jessica Dottie Whitaker, the 8-year-old child in Atlanta that was killed because their parents tried to cross, didn't know where they were, and approached a autonomous zone in Atlanta. Maybe you want to say that, and you can. And by the way, you can contact us. As you can see, Dallas speaking with us. We saw that Vic was mentioning something on Facebook. You can reach us on DLive Facebook, or you can call in at 607-242-1582. The phone lines are open as we speak. But let me ask you, do you really think that's the best thing that we could do? That's the best thing for everyone? Excuse me. Phone line was knocked loose for a second there. And do you honestly believe that this is the best way to have America? That this is what they were fighting for in World War II? to have these autonomous zones and to have the riots that always go exactly with them. And if you think I'm misunderstanding that, and here we go. This is from NPR. Unrest erupts after a man was fatally shot after an arrest attempt in Minneapolis. Well, wait a minute. Where was this in Minneapolis? This was at George Floyd Square. This was at the autonomous zone that the city got rid of and they rebuilt and then decided to turn around and destroy even more of the city. Billions of dollars of damage, of arson, of businesses that have shut down forever, leaving people in this community without jobs, without homes. These are the facts. This is the reality that is not being discussed in the news media right now. These autonomous zones, these riots we continuously see throughout this country that are coming from BLM and Antifa and the Democratic Socialists of America. These people are hurting everyone, especially in those communities. And what were they fighting over? Why were they getting upset? Because a man who had a warrant for his arrest for illegal possession of a firearm, something that they tell us they don't want you to have. They don't want you to have a Second Amendment. They want to take away people's rights. And this man who had a firearm and pulled that firearm on marshals and therefore died as a result of his threat, his violent actions, his attempted murder, because pointing a gun at someone is attempted murder, he died. And what was their answer? They turned around and they started burning down the city. As reported by NPR, later in the night, people vandalized numerous buildings and looted some, as reported by the police. And a dumpster was lit on fire, windows were smashed, and people were arrested. You know what's interesting about that, though? According to the New York Post, the protest group organizers admitted they were responding even when they didn't know about the shooting. They didn't know what was going on. This wasn't about someone trying to protect another person. It wasn't a riot because someone was wrongfully killed, because there was a police abuse or the belief that there was a police abuse. They rioted just to be able to riot. They destroyed their homes, their cities, their businesses just because Antifa and BLM are violent and that they want to change your life and they want to control your life just because they want to. You don't believe me? Mike, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, no. Trust the news media. The left-leaning news media are telling you themselves. And they are telling you that this is the fact, that these groups are going out and being violent. Let me go back to some of the comments. Dow mentions that John Locke explored this in his philosophy in the 2 treatises of civil government. Well, that's true, but Dow, most people probably don't know what that is. So I'm trying to bring this down to a every person kind of thing. I think we all can appreciate that autonomous zones, as they love to mention them, are literally holding American citizens as hostage, that they have no laws. They do not abide by any law. In fact, they tell you that they will not follow the law until the law changes to what they want it to be. And everyone can appreciate, we've all seen the videos for, 9 months, almost a year now, where we have seen these events over and over again. We have seen the violence that has come from them over and over again. We have seen the destroyed businesses, and we have seen people who are left without work over and over again. So even if people don't know who John Locke is, you know what an autonomous zone has done because you've seen it on social media, you've seen it on the major news. It's not just me saying this, you've seen it for yourself. And we have to admit, that isn't what America's about. That's not what we fought for on D-Day. That's not why we were fighting in World War II. Not to create these little monarchies of fringe political groups that represent less than 8% of the Democratic Party. Less than 8% of the Democratic Party. They're not even the party. 8%, a fraction, a fringe element that are trying to hold you in terror. Mike Bowie says, they're hardly a fringe group when they are funded and supported by the Democrats, Hollywood, big tech, mainstream media, Bill Gates, George Soros. And I would say to you, you're right, Mike, that it is a problem that we're seeing that BLM, they're getting funded, they're getting billions of dollars. And what are their leaders doing with that money? Are they reinvesting into Minneapolis, which has $1 billion in damages? Are they building new homes for the people who had their homes burned down by arson? Are they building new businesses? Are they starting new businesses to employ the people that are now home without work because of what they did, the violence and the riots that they've committed? Are we seeing that in Portland, in Seattle, in Austin, in Boulder, Colorado? Are we seeing that in New York City? No. Their leaders, like Patrice Cullors, are going out and buying 5 homes. They're spending millions, multi-million dollars, buying 5 homes. But they're not putting anything back. Look at all the protests in my local community. In my local community in the southern tier of New York, we have the BLM, we have the Antifa, we have the far left here. And you know what? They're not going out there saying, let's get rid of the crime. They're not saying, hey, we have to deal with drugs. No, in fact, what they did is they promoted drug use. They promoted the use of drugs. They didn't try and tell people don't use drugs. They didn't say all the money that they had raised, and they have raised a lot of money in the last year. They didn't take that money and say, let's reinvest that into building better businesses or building apartment buildings that are higher quality. Let's improve people's homes. They haven't done a single thing except run around in riots and in little marches, telling everyone how bad it is to live under the American system with the Constitution. They blame people because of their color of skin that they were born with, which is inherently racist. And they've done nothing to improve the actual quality of life of anyone. But they are getting elected into offices. They have 2 members of city council. They got 2 people on the school board. They're trying to get people elected to a lot of offices. They are gaining political power, but they didn't do anything for anyone. They haven't helped anyone. They haven't fixed anything. They haven't improved the quality of life. And that's a problem. And we should call them out for that. We should say, this isn't what America is about. This isn't why 16 million people went overseas and fought in Germany, in France, in England. They went across the world saying, hey, let's make the world more free, which we essentially have. And because of their sacrifices in World War II, believe it or not, there are fewer people in poverty in the world today. There are more people with a higher quality of living in the world today than there was in World War II. Because America led the steps forward because of those sacrifices. And people around the world in Africa have cell phones and they're able to talk with each other. They're able to see the news. They're able to farm better. They're able to feed their populations better. There's more regions that have more freedom, that women can go to schools, they can go and vote, they can drive cars like in Saudi Arabia. And that's not because the Saudis suddenly said, hey, BLM, we're going to do gender identity politics. We're just going to let women drive. That didn't do it. You know what did it? The 50 years of America saying, democracy works. Our people are better off. We have the best quality of life in the world, which is why we have lines 2 million people deep, not including the people who are running across thousands of miles of desert and hardship to get into our borders because our way of life, our Constitution is that good. And that's what people died for in World War II, because it's that good. And that led to the freedom of women in around the world, getting the ability to vote, being able to drive cars, to be able to go and get an education. That happened because of America. That happened because of the people who sacrificed their lives in World War II. And BLM isn't the answer. Antifa isn't the answer. The riots that we're seeing aren't the answer. And they know it because they're telling you they don't even know why they are committing the arson, the violence, the destruction of their homes and their communities. They don't even know why they're doing it. They don't even know what is the reason why they're going to burn everything down. They're just doing it. And their leaders are going around and having a benefit politically, personally, financially. And that should scare people. That should be upsetting. Dow mentions that he considers them just a bunch of grifters. The Antifa is a group of grifters. And he mentions that it's so frustrating to see the, quote, leadership discount them backed by the legacy media. And there you go. That's the problem. Because it takes very few people who use a lot of money, and they use the entertainers. I mean, think about it. When you hear about LeBron James, and he's like, oh my God, that's so bad, to defend a young black woman's life. When a police officer, because he happened to be white, and defended a black woman's life. Yeah, I'm talking about when that 16-year-old girl was trying to stab another girl, and that officer protected her life. And you got LeBron James saying, no, I wanted that young girl to die. We covered this on this show. We covered it in videos and podcasts where we saw Democrat after Democrat come out and say, no, it's absolutely normal to have knife fights with teenagers, to try and see them to stab each other to death. This is what we are fighting. That wasn't what we fought for in World War II. And this is what we fight against today. And by the way, if you don't agree, and you don't have to agree with me, you can call in 607-242-1582. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell us why we are misunderstanding this. Tell me how the riots and the reintroduction of an autonomous zone in Minneapolis is honoring D-Day, is honoring World War II, is honoring the sacrifices that people have made over the years to allow us to have freedom. Please explain to me how the autonomous zones are going to improve people's freedom as they destroy people's ability to live. You don't have to agree with me, but I want to hear them explain that. As they terrorize people across the world, across America, and export it to Great Britain and to France. So much so that Tokyo has said, for the Tokyo Olympics, there is no expression of BLM that they are going to allow because they consider it to be a racist statement. They consider it to be a negative. It's disruptive. It destroys people's camaraderie. It is exactly what the Olympics is not about, because the Olympics is about unity and BLM isn't. That's why it's been removed from the Tokyo Olympics. It's why it is illegal and it has been removed. The whole gender identity politics has been boycotted, is being removed from France. Why we see in Great Britain that they are fighting against this and have declared clearly through their own research, and they've done their homework, that Great Britain is not a racist nation, that America is not a racist nation, but that the policies of BLM and Antifa are. And what does that mean to us all? How does that affect us all? Because that's a big question. How is that affecting us? Well, let's really talk about that. Because I think it's affecting us all negatively. I think this is hurting us. And we're seeing this in leaders who are absolutely some of the worst people we could possibly imagine. I want to show you something that it was originally a video from the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin, far, far larger than I am, of course. And in the Rubin Report, he was talking about, and I'm going to show you what we are hearing from Joe Biden, who is helping to cheerlead these autonomous zones, who is helping to cheerlead the loss of freedom, the loss of the Constitution in America, in my belief. And I want you to see what this part here, and I'm going to be very specific. So just watch with me. Oops. Oh, of course I lost my spot. Bear with me. Where is it? There.
Oh, they don't. They're not working on people anymore. And when it's anything that comes out and
hang on, I lost my spot. Because I'm an idiot. There it is. Where is he? Here.
The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas. Does anyone doubt this whole nation would be better off from the investments those people make? And I promise you, that's why I set up this National Small Business Administration that's much broader, because they're going to get those loans.
Okay. So can you imagine that? This is the left. This is what the left is telling us. That this is Joe Biden, one of the proponents, along with Kamala Harris, who are telling us, you know what, black people, if you didn't vote for him, you weren't black. And if you are worried about voter laws, you know what, a voter ID, black people don't know how to get ID. So they need the help of Joe Biden. They need the help of the Democratic Party because black people can't get IDs. Yes, Joe Biden has said that. And Joe Biden, as you just heard him, you're black, you have a business. Well, you're not smart enough to get a lawyer. You're not smart enough to get an accountant. Can you imagine that? What kind of statement is that? How is that promoting anyone? How is that uplifting? How is that the American dream and ideal? Because I can tell you, there are millions of people who are coming into America and they don't think that's true. They don't think that the government has to hold your hand, that Joe Biden and BLM and these Democratic Socialists, that they are going to be the ones who are going to give you a job. They know that people know how to get a lawyer. They know how to get an accountant. But Joe Biden seems to think that people are too stupid. If you happen to be black, that you're not smart enough to be able to do that. And here's the response that they had. And I'm going to come back to the comments in just a second. But this is what the response was. This is Amala Epkenobi. I can't pronounce her last name. I'm sure I got it wrong. But this is what she had to say about it.
Seriously, though, when you hear a statement like that, like, what does that make you feel, make you think? Like that is racism, man. That is racism.
It is on its very face, it's racism, and it's a big part of what made me leave the left. Like you said, the soft bigotry of low expectations. So now we can add to the list that black people can't get lawyers, they can't get accountants, they can't get voter ID, they can't get into college without help from anybody. They need their businesses elevated on platforms like YouTube and Netflix and Uber Eats. It's just they expect so little of us because we are the victims of American society, apparently.
See, and I have to tell you, I think that's a very true statement, that BLM, Antifa, the far left, and in general, the leadership of the Democratic Party, and I want to be very clear, not the rank and file Democrats. When I go out and I see my friends and I talk to people, and many of them are Democrats, some of them are libertarians, some of them are Republicans, some are conservatives, but I know people who are progressives, I know people who are Democrats, and I can tell you, by and large, the people I speak to, they don't believe that I, because of the color of my skin, don't know how to get an attorney, that I don't know how to get an ID, that I can't afford an ID, that I don't know how to get an accountant, that I am someone who needs to be handled from cradle to grave by the government to be able to be intelligent and live a life. They don't believe that, whether they're white, black, or otherwise. But it seems the Biden administration believes that. It seems that this is what Antifa believes, what BLM believes, and that's why they're burning down our cities. So that they can control how you get to live, especially if you happen to be a minority. And they want you to support that. And they want you to believe in the gender identity politics that says that if you're white, well, then you're guilty, and that's why you have to support this. And if you're black, you don't get a choice, but you have to support this because you're not smart enough to do anything else. And that is not only is it insulting, it's racist to the greatest degree that I've heard in a long time. And if you disagree with me, please tell me why. I'm not saying that you have to agree with me. This is America. You have freedom. I want you to use your First Amendment right. If you're watching this in Great Britain, if you're watching it in France, if you're watching it in South Korea, any of the Canada, any of the free nations in the world, and you're able to see this, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. If you think that they're promoting this, that it's okay to tell a group of people based on the color of their skin that you are not intelligent enough to do what every single person in that nation is doing, please tell me how I'm wrong. Please explain it to me. Let me go to some of the comments. Dal had mentioned that BLM and Antifa and the riots in autonomous zones are negatively affecting our children for certain, as it requires to force an admission from the kids that normally has been demonstrated to not exist. Children just see other children, and I agree with you. Dal goes on to say race division is a learned behavior through later indoctrination, which is being pushed earlier and earlier on our children. That is the whole purpose of critical race theory in our schools. This is why and I swear to God, look at every high school, look at every elementary school, look at every college and community college in America this September. Look at the curriculum, and you want to have some fun? Look at the mathematics division, all the math teachers and all the math curriculums, and I guarantee you will see critical race theory. They are turning math into racism. They're going to talk to all these students, to all these kids, and they are going to be teaching them this September that math is racist. That 2 + 2 equals racism. You think I am joking? I can show you the articles. We have covered it on this show before. They are going to teach your kids. That is the plan. I know for a fact that in the southern tier of New York, at least, there are several schools and higher education organizations, the colleges in the region, are going to be teaching in their math courses racism. They're going to tell you that math is racist. What does this have to do with learning 2 + 2 = 5? I don't know. But they're going to teach all those kids in college, they're going to teach kids in the schools that it is racist, that math equals racism. How does that improve anyone's life? Love to TVL. What does that mean, by the way? Love to TVL. It's an abbreviation for something. Thank you for joining us, by the way. If the leftist lips are moving, they are lying. Lisa, hello. Lisa is with us. Critical race theory is racism. Parents and concerned citizens need to attend school board meetings and speak out against this. I agree. And I have gone on there, and you've seen, and we've done the videos of going on to the school board meetings and speaking out and saying this is wrong. And I think we need to do more of it. Oh, love to travel. Thank you. Hey, Tina. Okay, it's Tina. Critical race theory is, you know what critical race theory is? It's what we heard from Joe Biden, as I just showed you. Critical race theory is saying you're too dumb to do it for yourself, that the government has to do it for you. Because that's the only answer. The government, when the government says black people and Hispanics are too poor to afford a free or very cheap ID that costs about the same as ordering a pizza for delivery. I mean, in almost every state in the nation, actually all states in the nation, the cost of ordering a Domino's pizza is more expensive or equal to just as expensive as getting a government ID. And black people are so poor, according to Joe Biden and the people who believe in critical race theory, that black people can't afford that. And that they're not smart enough to go online and to find out where the local DMV is, even as we get cars and driver's licenses. But we're not smart enough to be able to go there to get an ID. We can get a car, we can get a driver's license, but we're not smart enough to get an ID. Really? Does that make any sense? We can't figure out how to get to vote, but we can get a driver's license. We can't afford an ID. It costs what it costs to get a pizza. This is critical race theory. This is why Joe Biden says this is why Joe Biden says if you don't vote for him, you're not black. That's why Joe Biden says, as he just did, if you own a business and you're black, you can't run that business because you're not smart enough to get a lawyer. You're not smart enough to have an accountant. And you need the government to pick you out and to give you money because you don't know how to run your business, and without the government there to support your business because of the color of your skin, well, your business is going to go under. Tell me how that is not insulting. I know the media doesn't tell you to you like that. Joe Biden just said it, but the media changes it, and the BLM and the far left, they change it and say, well, no, that's not how he said it. They want to say it a different way, but that's what he's saying. Same thing with women. Oh, women can't run businesses without the government there to help them because they're not good enough. That is insulting. That's what they are saying. And we need to be honest with each other and say, that is what they're saying. That you as a woman, you as a minority are not good enough. That's why the government has to be there. If they were saying that the playing field isn't level, that, you know what, there's a bias, that would be one thing. That's not what they're saying. Let's get it right. They're not saying that. Because what they're saying is, you can't do it, so we, the government, are going to do it for you. And you know what? When the government comes around and they say, here's a check, you don't have to go to work, here's a check. Oh, we're going to give you your business. You have a business. We're going to give you money for that business to keep it alive. Oh, you need to vote. We're going to give you the vote. We're going to tell you how you can vote. We're going to send our people to make sure you vote the right way. They're telling you that you're an idiot. They're telling you that you're not smart enough to live your own life. They're telling you that you're a child and that they have to be the parent. And guess who runs the government? It's not all these altruistic, wonderful people. It's not Martin Luther King running around. It's not Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. He's not running the U.S. government. He's not part of the Democratic Party. In fact, if he tried to join the Democratic Party, Mahatma Gandhi would be considered a radical and a conservative, and they would kick him out. They would call him a racist. Gandhi. Think about it. Look at the principles that are being promoted by BLM, by Antifa, the principles that are being promoted by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They would call Gandhi a racist. And they're telling you, don't listen to them because Martin Luther King, Gandhi, they said, be self-reliant, do for yourself. Malcolm X, do for yourself, build it yourself, be responsible. And the government's saying, and we're listening to the Democrats right now, and they're saying the Democratic leadership, the progressives, the Democratic Socialists of America are out there saying, don't be responsible. Just do what we say. We'll take care of you because you're a child. And we have to take care of you like a child. We'll give you money because you don't know how to make it for yourself. We'll give you a place to stay because you don't know how to get a home. We're going to give you the things that we want you to have. Don't ask for more. Don't do more. And if you do, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a race traitor, you're an Uncle Tom or whatever else they want to call you, an Uncle Tim. And then they want to take away all your freedom. I find it terrifying. And I say it again. This isn't what D-Day was supposed to be about. What Joe Biden just said, as I showed you, is not what D-Day is about. That's not what America is about. But let me go to the comments. So, I want to pick up where people have left off. Lisa mentions that it's so insulting, and the lamestream media ignores his racist comments, Joe Biden's racist comments. Dow mentions no voter ID, no problem. Remove ID regulations on everything else. Social Security, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, driver's licensing, passports, bank accounts. Oh, that's too far. It's too much. That's right. These are the things that everyone has. And we've heard Joe Biden say it. We've heard Democrats say this. We've heard Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand. We've listened to the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate as an example. In California, in many of the Democratic strongholds, they've already said this, that you don't know how to do any of these things. You don't need these things, that the government's going to take care of it. Lisa mentions, if you say that you don't see color when you look at someone, in other words, you treat everyone the same, that's racist. That's right, they are saying that. If you say, I don't look at color, I don't believe in color. I was raised in the 60s, 70s, 80s that, you know what? We don't look at people's color. Don't look at someone and judge them on the basis of the color. And now today, if you say that, they will tell you you're a racist because white people are guilty. That there is an inherent guilt by birth. That there is a bias. You've heard about it before. The white bias, the white privilege. They're telling you by birth that you are different and that you are lesser. And think about it. When they say there's white privilege, what does that mean? That there's black inferiority. That they're saying that you aren't good enough as a person of color. Because that you can't have one without the other. If there's a privilege to being white, it means you're inferior if you're not white. If it's a privilege to be a male, you're inferior if you're not a male. If they're, according to the BLM, to the gender identity hustlers out there, when they say that, there's a bias on being heterosexual, well, then they're saying at the same time, they're saying, well, you are deficient if you happen to be gay or trans or anything else. That is inherent in their comments. You can't have one without the other. When they say this is better, this is the one in charge, they're saying that these are the pinnacles that to be white and white privilege, male and male privilege, heterosexual and heterosexual privilege, that they are inherently saying, and everyone else is lesser. And because you are so deficient, the government has to come out and give you a hand and take care of you because you can't do it for yourself. And I say again, that is not why we fought D-Day. That is not why America is the greatest nation in the world, and why we are the shining beacon of democracy, and why there are 2 million people legally waiting in line for 10 years at a time to get into this nation, and 11, 20, 30 million people have illegally crossed our borders to be part of this nation, even as a second-class citizen and illegal alien hiding in the shadows, because even that life is better in America than anywhere else in the world. But if you think I'm wrong, I want to hear why. And I'm telling you, you can call in 607-242-1582, and you can leave a comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Let me get back to some of the comments. Mike Bowie says, Biden says you ain't black, like that's how black people talk. So condescending. He does have a condescending way of speaking. So does Kamala Harris. And I'm going to be speaking about her in a minute. Martin Luther King Jr. is even racist now. That's right. According to the progressive Democrats, Martin Luther King was a racist. That's what their ideology is. It's so insane. Dow mentions, I always pointed at the historic example of early federal and state representation that it used to be considered a civic duty to run for election and office and was a volunteer position, not a career. It was never meant to be a career. No one should, and I say again, term limits are absolutely needed because we have people like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, like Kirsten Gillibrand, who have been in there, like Sheila Jackson Lee and Maxine Waters. These people have been in there for decades. They've been in office longer than I have been alive, and I'm 53. And these people are destroying our nation. They're not helping us. They're not, if you think they're helping, let me mention to you, then what's their solution? Because they don't have a solution. They have a problem, and they're able to tell you how the problem is bad, and they know how to make it worse, but they don't have an answer. What's the answer to the eviction crisis where 12 million people are still not getting an answer on how they're going to be able to pay back the money because they were kicked out of their jobs because of COVID? And where's the answer on that? They kicked it down the road. We won't get an answer on that until September. And I bet you they push it past that until they get to the midterm elections because it's about the power politically and not about whether or not you actually get a benefit. Let me continue. Lisa mentions, we need you in the state Senate now that Senator Akshar is not running for re-election. I'm going to get to local politics, and I do want to talk about Senator Akshar's race. Fun fact, you need to provide multiple forms of ID to get, Mavis says, fun fact, you need to provide multiple forms of ID to get a government assistance. Does that make the government racist? Which is interesting. Yeah. You don't need an ID to vote, but you need an ID to go into social services and to get help. You need to prove who you are. This is the problem. It makes no sense. Dow goes and says, Vasa Dragon for state senate. Thank you. I like that. Ann Field mentions that critical, and by the way, hello, Ann. It's good to see you with us. Critical race theory is the racism of low expectations. Mavis mentions that, well, they can't kick anyone out after September. It will be too cold. And again, this is how it gets down the line. Oh, we don't have an answer. Evictions? How are we going to deal with the evictions? January 1st, they were supposed to be, the eviction moratorium was supposed to end. Kick it down to July. And then they kicked it over to September. They don't want to answer these problems. Actually, it went to March, then to July, and now to September. They're kicking it down the road. And then it's going to be the winter again. Oh, we got to wait until after the winter. So it'll be January again. The process keeps going. They don't know how to deal with inflation. They don't know how to deal with getting people back to work. We're just going to give you money. We're just going to print money, which is devaluing the dollar, destroying your savings, and increasing the cost of everything, which is why inflation is up 5%. And by our estimate from February, which I can show you the video if you'd like to see it, it's on YouTube, where we've mentioned in February, you're going to see double-digit inflation in the second half of 2021. And you know what? We now have heard from all of the major investment houses in May that said, you know what? The second half of the year is going to have more inflation. Yeah, we knew that in February because they don't want to tell you the truth, because they're assuming you don't know what's going on and they don't want you to speak up. And this is why we're seeing Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the social media giants are silencing you because they don't think you're smart enough. They don't think you know how to do these things. They don't want you to vote unless you vote the way they want you to vote. They don't want you to speak with your neighbors. They want you to be isolated from your neighbors. They want you to judge your neighbor based on the color of their skin and their gender and their sex. This is how you destroy a democracy. And they're telling you that they're going to destroy your life and your livelihood because it's in your best interest. Because they're doing you a favor. Because you're not smart enough. Just like Joe Biden told you. Just like Joe Biden said. When he said this, this is what Joe Biden said. Again, I'll play it again.
Have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas.
No.
The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants.
I'm telling you, again, that's insulting. And it's untrue. Untrue and insulting. But if you don't agree with him, you are a racist. If you don't agree with that racist statement, somehow that means you must be racist. Why? Because the old white rich man in the White House is telling you, as a person of color, that you are inferior, that you are lesser, that you aren't smart enough to open up a business and realize I need an accountant. Or maybe you're smart enough to do your own accounting, that you need a lawyer, even if you don't need a lawyer for your business. Oh no, but you're just not smart enough. And your business is going to fail unless this old white rich man comes in and takes care of you because he's a Democrat, because he's a progressive, because Democrats, progressives, socialists are going to be good. They're going to take care of you because you're not good enough. That is not what D-Day is about. That's not what we fought World War II about. That is exactly the opposite of why America is a great nation. That is my opinion. You can tell me I'm wrong. And if you want to, and you can say it on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on DLive, you can call into the show at 607-242-1582. The phone lines are open. I will give you all the time you need to explain why I am wrong. But you know what? I never hear from Antifa. They don't call in. BLM, they don't call in. Citizen Action, Indivisible New York, the Democratic Socialists of America, especially the Ithaca chapter, they don't call in. And they know who I am. They see the phone number too. They watch these videos. Occasionally they'll make a comment after the fact. But they won't address this. Why? They won't tell you, BLM, what are they doing for your community? What have they built in your community? They don't want to tell you that. But they will tell you that you need an autonomous zone, that you need to get rid of all the laws until you capitulate, that they will use terror tactics against you, which is taking over your property, isolating the police, and instilling martial law, military law, violent mob rule. They're more than willing to do that. They'll tell you why they need to do that, and they're going to tell you, well, it's because of my race, because white people are bad. That's not an answer. Let me go back to some of the comments. Dow mentioned that he was speaking to Mavis that the justification and voters will back it because no one wants to see folks freeze to death in terms of the extension of the eviction moratorium. That's just going to keep going down the road and down the road. Mavis mentions, if I was a homeowner, I'd stop paying taxes and just walk away from the house at this point. Government wants me to not get paid. They can deal with it. And I wish you could. As a homeowner, I wish I didn't have to pay taxes, but I do. Because it helps my community. And they count on that. And if they didn't do it, good boy, that's my puppy. And if I didn't do it, they would try and take my home. They would take my property. That's a problem. Sorry, folks, my puppy's upset. Come on. Sorry, folks, my puppy's upset. No, okay. Just checking if something, what it was that was affecting my puppy and why he was upset. Dow mentions that the answer to many of these problems place local and state representatives that are focused on a community level to have private industry and small businesses encouraged to build local economies. And he goes on to say, too bad small business regulations are so onerous and make individuals struggle incredibly just to build capital and to get started. Yeah, there's a huge burden based on the regulations created by individuals like Andrew Cuomo, created by like the state Senate of New York, like the Assembly in New York, like the state Senate in Michigan or in California, the Assembly. That is the problem. Someone's going. And sorry, someone was calling me. And that's the problem. And that is a big problem. I think there's someone at my door, by the way. Give me a second, folks. I want to just check. Okay, so, and that's one of the problems. Mavis mentions, wouldn't need an accountant or a lawyer if the government could get out of the way. Classic example of government creating a problem and then promising to solve it. Well, I mean, that's exactly why we see the government is always in the way. They're always causing a problem. Because, you know, remember it was Reagan. Everyone remembers the worst things you could possibly hear are, I'm with the government and I'm here to help. And the government never helps. John mentions that, have I discussed the local races in Broome County? Not yet. I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. And yeah, my puppy was a little excited there for a minute. Sorry, looking at all the comments here that are coming in. One second, folks. Someone's at my door. All right, folks, hang on one second. And I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to play Biden speaking again for a moment. I just need to run and open my door and I'll be right back. I apologize. Sorry about that, folks. Oh, I didn't even turn it on. I apologize for that, folks. Someone was just at my door, so I had to address that. But picking up where I was leaving off, and I apologize. Life happens. Life is surprising that way. So these are some of the problems that we're seeing here. Government is getting in the way, and they are telling us, and they are using the ability to say that if you don't listen to them, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're an ist and a phobe, and they use that to try and to, in the same way that we see George Floyd Square, the autonomous zones, they use these tactics against you to force you against your will to do something you wouldn't normally do. It's the worst thing we could possibly see. It is, again, this isn't what D-Day is about. This is exactly the opposite of that. And I have to wonder, because it also, we see that, and I've been talking a lot about Democrats and progressives. I don't like it when I see it on the other side either, because I'm not afraid to talk about Republicans. I'm not afraid to talk about when we see Republicans do the wrong thing. And I've always said that. And we have brought that up. And I will bring it up again with you right now, because I see that in my region, we now have a gentleman. We have Senator Fred Akshar, who is now going to run for Bern County Sheriff. See, I have a problem with this. We have a state senator Fred Akshar. And whether you agree with him as a state senator or you disagree with him as a state senator, if you've watched his career as it has changed, and we see this, and this is endemic of what we see on the left, on the right, in New York State, in California, in Washington State, all across the country, we're seeing the same thing here, where we see an individual who is using one position, one elected position, to get them into another one. We have State Senator Fred Akshar, who was originally a state police officer, and he then became a state senator. That's fine. I'm not going to complain about that. People do that all the time. You move from one position to another. He got elected. His statement at the time when he got elected as a state senator, he told us that this was because he could help the community, that being a state officer was great, but he could help the community more by being a state senator. He's now turning around and he is now telling the public that he wants to be, and I believe it's in his statement here, that he now wants to become a sheriff because it's in the best interest of the community. It helps his family. It helps everyone because he can serve them better, not as a state senator, but now as a sheriff. Well, I have to ask the question, which one is it? And I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this because this is endemic of what we see all the time. Politicians are assuming that we're not paying attention. Well, you told us to become a state senator, you told us the exact opposite of what you're telling us now as you're trying to go and become a sheriff. And it's up to you whether you think he's a good person, a good representative, or a bad one. He has an opponent, Katie Newcomb, and you can ask that question yourself. But I have to ask the question is, why are you changing your story? You told us one thing, and now you're telling us another. We watch our elected officials flip-flop, and no one questions it. And I mean, no one is questioning it. When you look at this article, which is from the local news, the Binghamton homepage, from our local news media, and what are they saying? Nothing. They have nothing about what did he say at first? Why did he become a state senator? Because it is the exact opposite of the reason of why is he trying to become a sheriff. And that is important for voters to know. That we should be able to look at this. And I don't care that he's a Republican and that I'm a Republican. That doesn't mean I can't question, why are you changing the story? And we need to hold our representatives accountable. They have to answer these questions. And if we're not getting answers to these questions, especially because our media isn't giving us that answer, there is a problem. And that goes back to the same thing I have a problem with, I've just been talking about. That if we don't have, if we have a media, if they're telling us, oh, you don't need to know, you only have to do what we say, we're not paying attention, they're assuming we're not paying attention, that is a problem. And this is a big deal. We need to know these things. We need to know why these people are running for the elected offices that they are, and we need to hold them accountable. And they need to give us answers. And we need the media to ask these questions. And we need to call them out so that when Joe Biden says, you ain't black, we need to say, that's racist. Not, oh, you misunderstood him. When he says black people aren't smart enough to have an attorney, to have an accountant, we need to be able to call him out and say, that's racist. You don't get to say that. That's insulting. When we hear critical race theory being promoted and saying, well, math is about racism, not math, we need to say, that's insane. We shouldn't teach this to our children in high school or in college because that's not making any sense. We need to hold them all accountable. Greg Vinton mentions that it's good to keep everyone informed. We do try. Dow mentions that it's a noble goal for Mr. Akhtar to try and run for the Senate. By the way, he hasn't given up his Senate seat yet. This is next year's election, and he's not resigned his position as a state senator. Instead, a former mayor, Mayor Rich David, is now going to try and take over his position. And for those people who've been paying attention to this program, that is exactly what we told you was going to happen 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we told you that Mr. Akhtar would become a sheriff and that Mayor Rich David would run for the New York State Senate. And if you're telling me that, is this a setup? The answer is yes. Is it politics? Absolutely. Is it illegal? No. Was this planned? Yes, absolutely. And if you don't think it was planned, Rich David, Fred Akhtar comes out, makes a statement, I want to run for sheriff. The next day, Rich David says, I'm going to run for state senate. You think they didn't know that? You think they didn't coordinate that in the same party, working together, guys who know each other? And I happen to know them both. For full disclosure, I know Senator Fred Akhtar. I know Mayor Rich David. I have no ill will with them. I'm not saying this because I don't like them. I'm a Republican. I'm in the party. I've known them for many years. But at the same time, we need to hold everyone accountable. We need to raise questions. We need those questions answered. John had asked, will they show up on this show? Will we see it? Probably not. I know I have Thomas Quitter, who is a libertarian, and he's run for the New York State Senate, Senate seat 52 last time. He's going to be running again. I'll have him on the show next week. I know he will answer questions. I know I've offered it to Democrats, and occasionally they do. I know occasionally some of the Republicans will. But will Fred Akhtar or Rich David be on there? No. In fact, I've had an open invitation for Rich David for 8 years to be on this program. He has never, ever come on. He has constantly told me he will. He has never come on to this program. Take that as you will. Dow mentions, how could he serve better as a sheriff? How can he serve better the public? In this case, Senator Fred Akhtar serve the public better as a sheriff versus a state senator. That's not for me to answer. That's for him to answer. I don't know. One makes laws that could preserve our freedoms. The other would just be enforcing the laws that come from a progressive legislature. Does that indicate that he would not enforce unconstitutional legislation? That's a great question, and it's a question that should be asked of him. I don't know. How is it better to allow laws like we have seen and we've talked about on this show? The state legislature of New York wants to make it illegal for you and I to be able to have a bulletproof vest to protect ourselves and our families from the increasing wave of crime that we see not only in the autonomous zones, but throughout our state and throughout our nation. The skyrocketing gun violence, the death and murders from criminals who don't follow the law, even as we get punished. And the answer from the state government in New York, in California, in Michigan, in many states is, oh, well, let's punish the law-abiding citizens and take away their ability to protect themselves, to get a bulletproof vest if that's what we want. And they want to make that a crime, to protect yourself. A bulletproof vest, which does not affect anyone else, is not a weapon. They don't want you to protect yourself. And he's saying, well, better than trying to fight against that law and stop that bill from becoming law, enforcing the law is what he thinks would be the best thing. Now, that is his statement. You can ask him why that is the case. I don't know. And John mentions Nick Libis is considering a run for the Senate as well. And for the Senate seat that is now open, Mayor Rich David would be facing the Republican Nick Libis for that same seat. Yes, and I know Nick Libis as well. So again, I know all the players that are involved here, all the people who are running for these offices on the Democratic side, the conservative side, the all and libertarian side. So I know them all. I'm not trying to tell you pick one or the other. That's not my job. My question is, what are they doing? And even though this is a plan, and Democrats have plans as well, is that in the best interest of the public? Are you getting the right questions asked? And I don't think we are. And that is a problem. That's a problem in the media. And when you see that problem, that they're not being asked the right questions, and I'm going from the local to the national, because Joe Biden isn't being asked the right questions. Kamala Harris is not being asked the right questions. When we don't see our politicians being asked the right questions, they do stupid, stupid things. They destroy our economy. They destroy our jobs and our businesses. You may say, well, Mike, how do you know that? No one's asking Joe Biden to explain the insanity of what's going on in our southern border. We have covered this for months now. Children are going on, it's child abuse. And yet, neither Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris will say it's child abuse to send a child 1,000 miles from Venezuela in the failed socialist attempt, that social experiment, and send that child to America to be put into cages, actually putting children in cages like sardines, which we have shown you the video from Ted Cruz himself, Senator Ted Cruz, having taken that. And they won't let us go down. They won't let the news media go and look at this. We have already reported 2 weeks ago that they are shipping these kids out and spreading them out around the nation in the middle of the night, as they did in Tennessee. And we've shown you the evidence of that, the news reports of that. And no one is asking the question, why is Joe Biden not addressing this? Why did Joe Biden throw out all of the immigration programs that were limiting the amount of illegal immigration that was happening in our nation? Why is Kamala Harris entrusted with running this? And why won't Joe Biden or Kamala Harris go to our southern border to actually fix this? I mean, that's a big deal. You want to talk about, tell me that they think that they have the best answer, that they're doing the right thing for everyone in America? Well, I can show you this and I'll answer it. Look at this. Kamala Harris at USA Today, 7 hours ago. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden haven't yet visited the U.S.-Mexico border. Can you imagine that? It's been months. It's been over 2 months. They still won't go to the border. But you know what Kamala Harris is doing? She's going to Guatemala. She's going to Mexico. She won't go to the American border. You have to fly over the American border to get to Guatemala or Mexico. And no one is asking her the question, why won't you go to our southern border? We're not holding her accountable. Besides the fact that it shouldn't be her doing it. It should be Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the guy who got elected, not Kamala Harris. So why in the world is she the one who's going? And why in the world, if she's doing that, she won't even visit the border? She won't allow, neither of them will allow the press to go to the border to see what's going on. We got to hold these people accountable. Tina mentions, oh, wait a minute, Vic mentions, I'm seeing people talk to each other. Vic mentions, how is it legal for the local chairman of the Republican Party in Broome County, Bijoy Datta, to lead the Republican Party and own a political consulting firm his selected candidates pay him a fee for? And that is a problem. And why does Chairman Bijoy Datta, who I know and I have spoken with, and again, I am a Republican and part of the party, and I do know Chairman Datta, and we have our disagreements, that is public knowledge. And one of them is the fact that he is a political consultant and also chairman of the Broome County Republican Party. I can't speak to that. It's allowed by law. It's legal in New York State. And he does legally own his business and run it. But I can't answer any more about that. That's something that B-Joy is, he's been on this program once in 15 years. So I can't speak to that. He knows my phone number. If he wants to be on the program, he can show up anytime he wants. Again, the program number for the show is 607-242-1582. He can call in at any moment. But will he? No. I truly, truly do not believe so. And I know he's online, and he knows the show, but he refuses. Tina mentions that these examples of many of the politicians that I'm speaking about right now at the local, state, federal level, that is how little they care about the children in America. That's right. Our border, southern border. There's so little care for these children who are in the cages. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez showed up at the gates. Well, no, she showed up at a parking lot. But she talked about these cages and how inhumane they were up until Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put hundreds of kids, thousands of these kids in these cages with COVID, and none of them will say, hey, this is child abuse, that the kids are being sent in the first place. And instead they're saying, well, we need to open up our border. And we need to let more of these people into our nation illegally, breaking our laws. And this is just a problem that just continues to grow and grow. And no one's willing to ask them a question. And these are not tough questions. And I think you need to ask these questions. You know, that's what this program's about. And I hope that if you have liked anything that we've been talking about, I want you to like this, share this with other people. Most importantly, subscribe so more people can see this. And if they disagree, they can add their voice as well. I'm perfectly happy to hear the other side. I understand the other side's position. I understand what their views are. I don't think they work for America. And if we actually bring it down to brass tacks and have an honest conversation, I don't think anyone agrees with this stuff because it doesn't work. It isn't in your best interest. It has not helped America. That's why we're looking at, by 2025, after just the 4-year term under Biden administration, America is going to owe $50 trillion. That is the projection from what he is spending right now. We're going to owe $50 trillion. Do you know what that means? Your money that you have right now is going to be worth half. You will be able to buy, for the same $100, you're going to go into the stores and you'll buy half as much food as you can today. Which says nothing about how much $100 would have bought you 20 years ago, back in 2000 or back in 1980. Don't even want to think about that. Right now, today, that $100 will buy you less. In 2025, you'll get half as much as you can get today. And our politicians aren't answering why. Instead, the answer is, you're a racist if you're asking this question, and we're just going to give you what you need, which makes you dependent on these politicians, that you can never question them, because if you do, they're going to take away everything you have. They're going to call you a racist, a sexist, an ist, and a phobe, and take away everything they just gave you. You know what that is? That's a dictatorship. That's not freedom. That's not a democratic government. That's not a representative government. That is a dictatorship. And that troubles me. Let me ask you, does that trouble you? When politicians don't answer questions and the media doesn't ask them questions, does that upset you? Does that make you worry? Isn't that important? I tend to think it is. I could be wrong. And I do want to hear what you have to say. I do want to hear your voice. I do want to see what you have to say about this. And when you're typing in, whether on DLive or on Facebook or YouTube, as long as the internet overlords allow us to be able to speak, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to see what you have to say. I want you to call into the show at 607-242-1582, especially if you're from Antifa, especially if you're BLM. I would love to hear from BJoy Data. Just, they're never going to do it, which should make you wonder why. So that's one of the problems. And, you know, it's amazing to me that we're seeing Kamala Harris. She's going around the world, meeting world leaders and engaging in conversations. When the world leaders come to America, she's the one who's having meetings with them. What's Joe Biden doing? What's he doing? I mean, honestly, when we had to talk to the South Korean president, it was Kamala Harris who was holding the discussions with him as she wiped her hand in disgust, pissing off our ally in South Korea. Where was Joe Biden? When Kamala Harris is going to Guatemala and Mexico to work out how we can, what they plan to do is give that government more money to keep their people in their country, which has never worked before and will not work in the future, because giving the government, another government, more money doesn't make it better. I mean, think about what we did with Pakistan. We gave Palestine. We gave Palestine in April $235 million. $85 million of that was free money. They went and bought 4,000 rockets and attacked Israel. That didn't make things better because we gave them more money and said, hey, be peaceful with Israel. And Palestine went and got 4,000 rockets, the exact opposite of what we said. Essentially, the Biden administration funded global terror. Now we have that same Biden administration is going to South America, talking to Guatemala, well, Central America, and talking to Guatemala and talking to Mexico and saying that we're going to give them more money. And all they have to do is keep their people there. It's never worked before. We already give Guatemala money. We already give Mexico money. What in the world makes anyone think that if we give them even more money, that it's going to have a different effect? We already give Mexico billions of dollars. Why is a couple $100 million more going to suddenly make the people of Mexico decide, oh, I don't want to cross the border to a better country where it's better to be a second-class citizen hiding in the shadows illegally than it is to be in Mexico? Same thing in Guatemala. Same thing in Venezuela. Same thing in almost all of South America and Central America. It's better to live in America as a criminal than it is to be in those nations, and we already give them billions of dollars. So why in the world is it going to make it better if we give them even more money that we don't have? That is bankrupting our nation and making it more expensive for you to be able to buy anything to feed your own family. Does that make sense, guys? Dal, Tina, Mike, Vic, everybody. Tell me, am I wrong? Am I misunderstanding this? Does this make any sense to anyone? If we're already giving them billions, if we give them a couple more 100 million, I mean, let me make this analogy for you. And this is what the media should be asking, really should be asking Nancy Pelosi, all of the progressives out there. Okay, so what you're saying is there is a crack dealer down the block. And that crack dealer is getting government, they're not working, and they're getting money from social services because they're not working. And what we want to do is we want to give that crack dealer more money paid for by the taxes of the community that they are predators on, and that's going to make them stop. That we just give them more money. We're not stopping them from being a crack dealer. We're not stopping them from continuing to poison our community. We're not taking away the benefit they get from the government for paying for their housing because they're on social services. No, we're not taking away anything. We're going to give them more money. And the answer is, if we give them more money, they'll stop being a crack dealer. They'll stop being a criminal. Why? Why in the world would they stop? And why in the world would we not want politicians in office who are going to say the best way to help the community is not to be part of the enforcement of the law, saying that when you break the law, I'm going to arrest you, even though if you do arrest them, look at all the people arrested for BLM, their charges are dropped. Instead of doing that, which is ineffective, how about we change the law in the first place and say we're not going to give them more money, and that we're going to close down our border, and that we're going to enforce the laws and make it worse for the criminals. Not for the law-abiding citizens, but the criminals. I mean, does that make sense? Or am I just completely out of my mind here? Because I could be. But I'm showing you the evidence. I'm showing you what they are doing, and it doesn't make sense. When someone actually gives you the answer to what they are doing, it doesn't make sense. It sounds really great. Kamala Harris has goals for her first foreign trip. She's not the president. Her foreign trip is, this guy is supposed to be the one making the trip. He's supposed to be making the deal, not her. And the fact that she's black and a woman, and actually she's not black, she's Indian and a woman, does not mean that she suddenly gets to have his job. That's not what she was elected for. And her answer is one of the worst things I've ever heard. We'll just give them more money than we're already giving them, and that will fix it. No, it doesn't. Throwing money at a problem doesn't make it better, ever. I mean, it just doesn't. Because if it did, with $28 trillion, the world would be really well off, and it isn't. Dow mentions that this is all very troubling and makes a person worry about that tomorrow there could be a delegation showing up at the door claiming eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture, or using banks and or corporations to seize property. Yes, that could happen. And to an extent, it is happening. Dow goes on to say money has never been the answer. It only lines the pockets of the administrations for bought support. Transferal of skills and true freedom has always proven that. People doing what they do. When we get the government out of the way, when the government stops saying, well, you're black, you're inferior, you can't do it without the government's help. When you stop that, people do fine. They do much better. Because that's not the job. The job of the government is not to pick winners and losers. It's not to pick the next Solyndra or A123 batteries. It's not their job. It's not their job to decide, hey, you know what, Mike? You're black. We need to give you money because you're black. And you know what? We need to take it away from your neighbors because they're white. That's racism. No, thank you. I don't want that. That's not the way life should be. And I'm not so inferior that I need the government to try and help me out. That is insane. And insulting. But maybe you think I'm wrong. And we should hear our politicians, like Chairman Bijoy Datta, should be championing this and shouting from the top of the rooftops, this is stupid. We need to stop this. And Mr. Datta happens to be a person of color. He should be right there with me. saying, stop insulting us based on the color of our skin and calling us inferior. Why he doesn't, I don't know. And he's never given a good answer on that. But this is mind-boggling, people. I truly believe it's mind-boggling. And this isn't the limit to it, because the government is saying, we can do it better for you. You know, if you may recall on this program, not too long ago, we told you there was a decision by the Ninth Circuit Court. And they decided that you don't have the right to go and take and protect yourself outside your home. Basically, they took the concept from New York State, from the New York State Assembly, and said, oh, you don't have the right to defend yourself with a passive bulletproof vest. You don't have that right. That's Bill A352, as I recall. You don't have that right, which we've reported on, and we've provided you that video with the link to the bill. And the federal government decided, or excuse me, the court system, right under the Supreme Court, the Ninth Circuit Court, decided you don't have a right not only to not wear the bulletproof vest like in New York, but you don't have a right to protect yourself or your family or your property outside of your home. The second you take a foot outside of that door, you don't get to protect yourself. And California decided not only do you not get to protect yourself, you can't protect yourself in your own home with a firearm that you know how to use. And you know what? Sometimes there are people who are trying to take care of us. Because when California said they want an assault weapon, which means semi-automatic rifle, which is something that there are tens of millions of Americans right this second who have a semi-automatic rifle, like a Ruger Mini 14, like the SCAR, well, excuse me, not the SCAR, the AR-15, that they have this, and California said, we don't like it, so you don't deserve to have it. And they want to take away that right. And the Ninth Circuit Court said they can take it away from you. And thankfully, a judge on June 4th, on Friday, said, no, that's wrong. You don't get to do that. The Second Amendment is about America's freedom, the freedom to protect oneself, family, home, and homeland, according to Judge Roger Benitez. That's what he believes. But California, which is run by progressives, they don't think so. They think you should be defenseless because you are inferior to them. These are the neo-nobles. I think I coined this phrase back in 2015, 2014. I've used it a lot. These politicians are neo-nobles. They think they're better than you and I. They think they can tell you how to live your life. They think you are inferior. And without their guidance, that you can't live your life. And folks, I have to tell you, I know these politicians on the left, on the right, and I can tell you, they are just like you. They are just as smart. They are just as dumb. They are just as well informed and just as well misinformed or with a lack of knowledge. These aren't, Andrew Cuomo, he's not some kind of scientist. He's not a doctor. He's not some brilliant genius. And yet he's making up the rules every day for over a year, deciding that, hey, you've got to wear a mask. You've got to isolate. You've got to be depressed. That you have to suffer depression because he decided this morning as he had a coffee and he thought it was too cold, well, then every business should be able to shut down. And he took away your job because of it. He killed 16,000 people for it. Then he wrote a book, got $5 million to tell you he's a great guy. And if you don't vote for him, you're a racist. I don't know. Going back to some of the comments. Dow mentions, if I recall correctly, New York is a duty to retreat state. That is correct. New York State is you must, if someone comes into your house breaks into your house in the middle of the night, and they want to, because they're trying to rob you, or I've had it happen where someone broke into my house and they happen to be high on PCP. And if that person breaks into your home high on drugs and they are trying to attack you, they want to kill you, the answer in New York State is run away from your own house, from your property. You have to grab your family and try and run away from this aggressor rather than defend yourself passively with a bulletproof vest, or even aggressively with a firearm to defend yourself and your family and your property, which is crazy. It's stupid, because the government will send someone to your home to try and protect you eventually. And they may or may not get there in time to save your life. And we see that happen all the time. I'm not picking on the police and the job that they do. I'm telling you that if it takes the police 5 minutes to get to your home, you may not be alive when they show up. Not because, especially if we are defunding the police and there are fewer of them, as we have seen in every single city, every single state that has an autonomous zone, every one of them that have defunded the police, we have seen violent crime go skyrocketing. Because criminals who don't follow the law do pay attention to the news. And they know that there are less police, so that means there are fewer people to stop them from committing crimes or to try and catch them after they have committed a crime. It's terrifying, folks. And I'm giving it to you straight. And if you think I'm wrong, I keep saying it. If you think I'm wrong, by the way, you can call for any reason. You can call in 607-242-1582. You can call for any reason and talk about any subject you want. But if you think I'm wrong, I want to hear it. Please tell me if I am missing something essential. I want to hear that about anything that we've been discussing. Dow goes on to say those Mini 14s are awesome, though to have a M1 carbine or an MG44 though. He prefers to have an M1 carbine or a MG44. And I would say an M1 carbine is beautiful, but you can't use it on home defense. For people who don't know what that is, an M1 carbine is actually what was used in World War II. Just to give you an idea of what it looks like in the picture, there you go. It's kind of like that. But it's not great for home defense, but it's a great firearm. Dow mentions that he remembers me using the neo-nobility term, and it is a pretty accurate descriptor. I've been using it for years. Like I said, I think about 2015. And they are treating these elected officials who are doing nothing for us except promoting their own power. They're just like Patricia Colors, who suddenly, out of nowhere, got millions of dollars and bought 5 houses. Meanwhile, BLM hasn't rebuilt a single house in Minneapolis. They haven't tried to put together a single program to cut the violence in Minneapolis, as there are drive-by shootings that are being recorded on national news live. They haven't done anything. That autonomous zone didn't stop crime, it increased it. And the answer for them was, as I showed you in the New York Post, they don't know why. They're just going out and they're burning down more businesses. They're just going out there and they're breaking windows and rioting just because. That's terrifying, folks. And who's helping us? Who's protecting us from this? It surely isn't the media that's out there saying, hey, don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry. We're paying attention. We're promoting the old senile guy who's white and rich, and we're telling you, you know what? We're going to tell you what he says. He's great. He's wonderful. And his answer is, government's going to take care of you. Even though he doesn't even know what's going on. Even though Kamala Harris is doing his job. And she's doing it badly because she can't make it. Again, She's going to Guatemala and Mexico. You gotta fly past the southern border of the United States to get there. What, she forgot where Texas was? She's from California. She knows where the border is. What, she won't go there? Why? Dow goes on to say that he thinks shotguns with double buckshot for home defense are really great ideas and very effective. Come here, Con. My puppy's a little upset. Come here. Come on. Hi, folks. By the way, if you've never seen Con, this is no. See, that's Con. Yes, I know you're a good boy. Hi, Con. Say hi. Con says hi. Okay. There you go. So that's my puppy, by the way. So, folks, I tell you, these are important things. They're critical. But they worry me. And I hope that you're sharing this. I hope that you do go out and you, share and like and subscribe, especially subscribe, so that, and comment, so that people can learn more about this, to hear this, and to ask themselves the question, what is going on? Who is the best choice? How do we stop this? And I'm bringing this all up because we can stop this. It's kind of like when we were talking at the very beginning of the show about depression. And the answer to depression is you go out and you talk to someone. You speak to people. You let them know when there's a problem, just like I did, just like I am doing. I've identified the problem. Yes, there's some depression going on. And the answer is not to hide from it, not to ignore it, but to address it and say, okay, I'm going to speak to someone. I'm going to speak to people around me. I'm going to try and prove that. And I want everyone who may be suffering from depression, and they are, there's nothing wrong with you. Crap is going on right now. Things are rough. A lot of people are suffering. I understand why you're suffering from depression, why I'm suffering from depression. Go and speak to someone. Well, the answer to that is the same thing as the answer to what's going on in our government. We need to speak. We need to voice our opinion. We need to share videos. We need to write letters to the editor. We need to write to our politicians and ask them these questions and remind them they are not neo-nobles. They are not better than us because they won an election. Because I can guarantee you, in my 15 years of doing this, of speaking and knowing these politicians before, during, and after they get elected, they don't get smarter just because they get more votes. It doesn't work that way. And just because they have the money and they think they should be elected doesn't mean that they should be elected. And yes, my puppy is a cute little boy. I do love him. He's a good puppy. Believe it or not, folks, Khan is 8 years old. He looks like he's a little puppy, and I call him my puppy, but he's actually 8 years old. And he still runs around like he's a puppy for the most part. A little slower, but almost the same. Dow mentions all those in Arizona were to organize and push out, the autonomous zones. Those held in autonomous zones were to organize and push out the rioters would be slapped with criminal law in the aftermath when order was restored. So they bunker down to avoid legal blowback from the state. You know, I wish that was the answer, but that's not it. Because we've seen from the riots that happened for the entire second half of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, they're not being prosecuted. People have been arrested over and over again. The bail reform bill in New York State made it possible that people like Masai Andrews, who was arrested, and it was reported in the news media, we've shown you the article, in Rochester for second-degree rioting, You know what happened? Revolving door. Went in, got arrested, turned around, was released the next day, came back out, was going back out to protest and possibly riot even more. That's just the case of it. How many times? We know that at least 14% of the people that were released from Rikers Island because of the bail reform turned around, and this is according to Governor Cuomo, they turned around and they went and recommitted more crimes. In fact, 10% of them committed 1.5 crimes, almost 2 times as many crimes each person. Not just 1 crime, 2 crimes per person. That's crazy. So the autonomous zones, people in the autonomous zones, almost none of them have actually been arrested. There was a gentleman who was caught in, I believe it was in Portland, and he got caught with a flamethrower. And he was released. How many people have been caught and arrested for violence, trying to commit arson, beating people down, and they are released? Who's been arrested for David Dorn? And there's the thing. How many people even know that David Dorn, his killer, do you know if he got arrested? How about the people who killed Jessica Dottie Whitaker? Did the people who killed her for saying all lives matter? A young mother was killed for saying all lives matter. Where's her criminals? Were they arrested? What about the people in the autonomous zones in Atlanta that killed a child? What about the people in the autonomous zone in the Chaz, the Capitol Hill autonomous zone, and where that 16-year-old boy was killed? Did they get arrested? What about all the buildings that were burned down and destroyed and the lives, tens of thousands of people, well, thousands of people who had their lives destroyed in Minneapolis, right around George Floyd Square? Did anyone get arrested for that? And the problem is they won't. They're not being held accountable because the neo-noble elites like Governor Newsom, Governor Whitmer, Governor Cuomo have talked to their single party rule, the Democratic Party and the progressives in their party who rule this state, and they're telling them, let it go. Because if you don't, you're a racist. But don't worry, the government's going to take care of you. It's terrible. Dow mentions that YouTube censored my more concise comment. In the absence of law enforcement and litigation prosecuting the rioters, in any other situation, the populace might organize, save for the law criminalizing them later. YouTube censored your comment? I'm actually concerned about that. YouTube should never censor anyone. And I disagree with that, and I disavow that. It's not me, and I find that to be a problem. But again, it's the same thing we've been talking about throughout this. And I understand how this makes people feel depressed, as we said at the beginning of the show. And I will say to you, the answer to that, like all of the things we're talking about, is we must speak up. We must share the videos. We must make the comments. We must share the comments. Like and subscribe as well. That's fantastic. But share the comments. Let people be aware of the information. And say, do you agree with that? Let's ask each other, do you agree with that? Do you really want that? Is this what we want? Do we want people to be considered lesser just because of the color of their skin? Do we want to be racist? So racist as to say that someone is inherently evil or intrinsically bad because of the color of their skin. Because that's what we're doing with critical race theory. And do we want to teach that to our children? Do we want to allow some people to break the law and other people have to be prosecuted? Whether that's the autonomous zones that are treasonous and insurrectionist by definition, or the illegal aliens that are crossing our border. Do we want to support the child abuse that is sending a child 1,000 miles by themselves into a desert in the United States to maybe be picked up by our government to try and have a better life. And they're being sent on that 1,000-mile trip by themselves with sex gangs and sex criminals and drug dealers and drug gangs. That's child abuse. And do we want to support that? Is it okay for Kamala Harris to skip over the border and ignore the problem? That Joe Biden can ignore the problem as the government tries to, in the middle of the night, without telling anyone, start shipping these kids across the country so that you can't find them anymore to hide the problem? Do we think that's the right way? Is that the right answer? Does that really help anyone? It's insane. Should we allow and ignore the fact that, like Dal has mentioned to us, that there is this censorship where he's making a statement on a show that is asking for your comments, that is asking for you to speak, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, on DLive, Twitter, asking you to speak up and to tell me right or wrong, whether you agree with me or not, to be able to add your voice. And they are trying to, and YouTube is telling us they are trying to censor our voices when it's a conversation between American citizens or, some of our friends over in Great Britain, some of our friends in France, Germany, Canada, Peru, that they're saying, oh, those people don't count. They're not important. How dare you? Ann says, such a sweet, oh, you saw Khan. Yes, he is a sweet dog. And he, Khan's letting me know somebody was near the door or there was a truck he didn't like. But I'm telling you, folks, this is important stuff. And it troubles me to see, and this is why we get censored. This is why it's hard for people to find this channel. It's hard, and that's why it's so important for you to subscribe and to spread the word and to tell me what you think as I show you the information, if you think I'm wrong. And if you want to see more of the information, after the show, we put in all of the links of everything that we're talking about so that you get to see it for yourself and you get to read it and say, hey, this was right or wrong, or I have a different opinion. I want you to know what's going on. Mike Bowie mentions critical race theory is Marxism 101. Yes, it is. It's also racist. It just is. So we got about another 2 minutes here, folks, before we go. And if you've been with us or you just showed up, I want to thank you for spending your Sunday. I know it's the middle of the summer. It's a great day. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us, to spend even a few minutes with us, or if you spent hours with us on this program, adding your voice. And if you're seeing this after the fact, don't worry. Leave a comment. We pay attention to all comments. We try and respond to every comment that we get. We are always paying attention to your voice because your voice matters. Whether it's in the UK, like some of our great friends over there, like Agent Black, or if it's in Germany, or it's in France, in Canada, in Peru. Hey, Eduardo. We pay attention to every voice, not just the American ones, not just the Republican ones, not just the ones we like, but everybody. And we're going to try and get more of the politicians that are running for the various races to be on here to try and answer some of your questions. Some of the people around the world making the policy, we want to get them on, and we're trying. And it helps. The more people that are subscribing here, the more likely it is we're able to get those politicians on to answer our questions, to speak to us, even when they're upset, even when they don't like us, even when they don't want to tell you what they're doing. Because just because they don't like it doesn't mean they get to not answer. Just because they don't like answering questions doesn't give them an excuse to not answer the question. Dow mentions that I misspelled Fauci. It's supposed to be Dr. Fawcett because he runs at the mouth. Yeah. We really didn't get to talk about that. I don't know. I enjoy showing up every Sunday. I really do. But Fauci is, and I meant to speak about that and to hear from what you had to think about it, folks. I think it's really sad that the government has been so busy trying to tell us how to live how the government wants to live our lives, how they want to control who we speak to, how we move from place to place, that they're suddenly, and then we find out after the fact, kind of like, oh, Hunter Biden's laptop, it's not real. 2 months later, it's real. Hunter Biden lied on his gun application. That's not true. A month later, yes, it is. Trump made a legal call. He broke the law in talking to the Ukraine 4 months later. Oh, that never happened. Our government's trying to tell us how to live our lives. They're trying to tell us what we should think, what we should feel. Autonomous zones? No, they're perfectly fine. It's not a riot. It's a protest. It's a mostly peaceful protest. That arson you see in the background, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's just a big marshmallow roast. Don't believe your eyes. Don't think for yourself. Do what we say. And Dr. Fauci is yet another example of that. Guy going, oh, what did I say? Dr. Fauci on Monday says something that on Friday he totally reverses. And that's if we're lucky, he might reverse it the next day. He could say something on Monday and on Tuesday he'll reverse his position. No, it's the exact opposite now. Meanwhile, we get to see his emails and he knows for a fact that both of the things that he just told us are a lie. And he's getting paid for this. And that's part of the same abuse that I see when I see Kamala Harris and her trying to run our immigration policy, which she's really not. And we know that Joe Biden definitely isn't. That's part of the problem that we see from Andrew Cuomo and his almost emperor-like kind of control of New York State, making up rules and making up his own science to be able to put in his own rules on any given day as he colludes with his brother to try and hide 9 sexual assault allegations and the death of 16,000 people. This is all the same problem, folks. At least I think it is. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Dow mentions that even meteorologists are more accurate than the government. Yeah. And the government right now is telling you, no. We're going to spend more money than anyone has ever seen spent before. More than most any government in the world. And it's okay. It has absolutely no impact on your life. We're just going to print money all day, all night for everything. And don't worry about it. It's okay. Because we're just going to raise more taxes. We're just going to raise taxes on businesses, which means they're going to raise prices on you, which means you're going to pay it. You're going to have less money, or rather, your money's going to be worth less, and everything's going to cost more. Yeah, Mike, that's exactly why I'm depressed. Because I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm telling you, it's getting worse. It is getting to the very worst state. I've made a lot of predictions over the years, and I run about 75, 80%. If you follow the show, you look at the things that we've put it out there, show after show, month after month. We've talked about the economy. We've talked about world politics. We've talked about local politics and elections. We tell you what we think. We put it on the line. And more often than not, roughly about 75% of the time, we're right. Not necessarily about the time frame, not necessarily the number of votes, but we tend to be right. It's because we're paying attention and we're talking to you and we are hearing what you have to say and we are looking at how effective these people are when they get into elected office, when they make these policies, when they make these laws, when they tell us you're going to be protected because we have the New York Safe Act. And when you're not protected, they turn around and say, oh, well, now we're going to put in a red flag law. And when that doesn't work, they say, well, you can't have a bulletproof vest because you are a criminal. And we sit there and say, nothing you've said has ever made us safer. Why am I supposed to believe you're going to make me safer now? You tell me to wear a mask. You tell me I don't need to worry about COVID. You can go out, Nancy Pelosi, go to Chinatown. Then you tell me, oh, no. Now you went to Chinatown? Now everybody has to be locked in their houses. You're a prisoner. We listen to Broome County Executive Jason Garnar. You have to be a prisoner in your home every other day. You're in isolation and only let out of your house every other day. We listen to these people tell us these things, and it makes no sense whatsoever, and it doesn't make anything better. No wonder we are all depressed. We are all suffering. And we're suffering because people are telling us that we are less than human beings, that some of us are worth more than others in a nation that believes in everyone is free and everyone is equal. And you can't be equal, you can't be free, and you can't be equal if someone is trying to also tell you that they need equity. Because that means they're going to take away from you. They're going to take away your freedom. They're going to take away your property because they can. And that comes from being a neo-noble. That's coming from you being too depressed. When you're depressed, you're not paying attention. You're not sharp. You're not reacting like you could. They're taking advantage of you. And maybe that's the biggest part of what I had to say today is the depression is something we're all feeling. It's not just me. It's all of us to different degrees. Some are more depressed, some are less. And we're all feeling it. And there are people who are taking advantage of us. And they're using all kinds of tricks. And they have a bunch of plans that they've made for years. And we've seen those plans and we've talked about those plans. And they're making sure we're in such a miserable state. We feel so terrible. We feel so bad that even the promise of making it just a little bit better is all of a sudden all they need to get away with it. And I have to tell you, don't let them do that. Talk with everybody. Don't let them get away with it. Comment is, it doesn't help when folks make predictions on trends and behavior based on evidence presented to openly discuss outcomes, that it is a slippery slope argument and discount it out of hand. Slippery slopes are not straw man arguments. They exist. Slippery slopes do exist. But, people they try and give us every excuse to get what they want. And they count on the fact that we're not paying attention to get away with it. They're counting on the fact that we're too depressed to notice, that we're too depressed to say anything or do anything about it. We got to speak up, folks. We got to share our messages. We have to speak and leave comments. We need to share these things and get other people involved and say, we're fed up with this. We're not going to have the autonomous zones. We're not going to let them break the law, have insurrectionist zones and call it a peaceful protest as we watch buildings burn down and people denied the ability to live their lives, to work at a job or have a business. That we have to reject the racism that's inherent in telling us that, well, you're a bad person because you're this color skin and you are inferior, so we're going to give you things because you don't know how to do it for yourself. We got to reject that, folks. We really do. Because it's not going to help us. It's not going to make us feel better. It's not going to make us less depressed. And it's damn sure not going to make our country more free. I don't know. That's the way I see it. And you may say, Mike, you're just wrong. Maybe I am. But I'm pretty sure I'm not that wrong. But I'm looking forward to hearing more from you guys. And everyone, I'm looking forward to seeing you next week and every week on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We had a very rough week this week, like we mentioned. Things have just been weighing down on us, so we weren't able to do other videos throughout the week. Going forward, we're going to, whether we want to or not, we're going to get out there. We're going to get back on the horse, and we're going to make sure we're keeping up because it's important. And we value you. And you're important. And we want to thank you for that. So, with that said, I want to say get out, get in the sunshine, talk to your friends, pay attention what's happening in our nation. Throw out the spin, pay attention to what are they doing. Not the headline, but what is it they're actually doing? And then tell someone else about it. And then tell someone else again. And then share something with them and say, just take a look. And maybe, if we do that, just maybe, we're going to make our nation better. Because we can definitely make it better than what it is right now. I want to thank you. I want you all to be well. And I'll talk to you all again very soon.